Oh gosh, look at the crowd.
Come this way.
Those who spread goodness radiate happiness to everyone around them. Introducing LOLC Finance Credit Cards. Fuel the goodness in you.
This is LMDtv. I'm Fazmina Imamudeen. Joining with us tonight is EU Ambassador to Sri Lanka and Maldives, Denis Chaibi. Hello, Ambassador Chaibi. I warmly welcome you to the show.
Thank you. Nice being here.
In the big picture context, how do you perceive Sri Lanka today as we're making slow but steady progress?
Well, it all depends how big the picture you take. You know, I was reading all the debate when Queen Elizabeth II died, and you know she was the queen of what was called Ceylon at the time for 20 years, and people were reminiscing that time and comparing to these. And you know, if you take the long period, for sure Sri Lanka has done wonderfully well. If you take the last 2 years, it has been a very, very difficult 2 years. Sri Lanka was almost at $4,000 GDP per capita when I arrived in 2019, and now it's closer to a third. Obviously, because the dollar is so strong and the follow-up of COVID. But you know, the default has caused a massive economic crisis. But if we go back in time, if we take the last 20 years, you know, between those two periods, Sri Lanka has for sure made steady progress. First, it ended a terrible civil war. It registered a serious economic growth, and it improved most of the human development indicators, education, maternal mortality. So for me, the foundations of Sri Lanka are a refined civilization in the most beautiful island. These are sound elements and full of potential. So the years ahead will be fraught with challenges, but Sri Lanka has the people to overcome them.
The EU most recently announced a poverty reduction program to the tune of 60 million euros for Sri Lanka. How will this work, and are there plans to extend this assistance?
So it's not really a poverty reduction program. As I said, even at 3,000 GDP per capita per head, Sri Lanka is still a middle-income country. It's more about contributing to a peaceful and inclusive society, and the inclusive element means that there should be social solidarity and also the green recovery. We think that the environment is very, very important for Sri Lanka's future. So this amount of 60 million is being committed until 2024, and then depending on the result, we can extend more funding. What is important is that to also bear in mind that we are still implementing, still spending the money of the previous cycle. So the previous cycle, there's still almost close to 200 million euro being spent on rural development and reconciliation. So overall, we have a very large portfolios of actions. And what is very important is that these actions are really mostly grants. So there's no debt, it doesn't contribute to debt. We are not expecting any reimbursement. These are actions that are continuing despite the difficult economic situation, and they are even more useful in these current times.
India, China, and Japan have been at the forefront of efforts to help Sri Lanka come out of the multiple crises it faces. Where does the EU come on into this?
Well, there's a major difference between India, China, Japan, and the EU. As I just said, EU has been a grant provider. There was no loans, whereas India, China, and Japan are big lenders to Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka doesn't owe much money to the EU, but it owes a lot of money to these three countries. This means that we are not in the same basket. We are not as crucial for the debt restructuring exercise for Sri Lanka. But having said that, being a development partner rather than a financial partner, We are very active in the crisis response. So, for example, COVID triggered a massive redistribution of funds from the EU with a package for the tourism, a lot of money for the World Health Organization. Now, for the current food shortages, we have ECHO, or humanitarian arm, which will grant 1.5 million euro. So we are reallocating our money, and we are prioritizing fertilizers, agriculture, and entrepreneurship programs.
Japan has said it's willing to play a role in Sri Lanka's quest to restructure its debt portfolio. Is there any chance that the EU can play a part in this? And if so, in what capacity?
So as I said, we are not as a big creditor as Japan is, but we really want to help Sri Lanka and play a useful role. And in that, it's perhaps not as much the EU as the member states, so the European member states that are crucial. They have a number of seats at the IMF board, and in capacity, they have quite a say on, you know, what the IMF will discuss with India, Japan, and China about the terms of the debt restructuring. So we really want to play an active and positive role on this exercise, but it will be more led by the member states of the European Union than by the European Union itself.
In the context of Sri Lanka's colonial past, and the fact that at least 3 European nations have ruled the island in the colonial era, would it be fair to say that Europe should help us get back on our foot, like some Asian nations are doing now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that Europe is doing its bit to put Sri Lanka back on its feet. I mentioned, you know, quite a lot on development, but, you know, that's a small part. First and foremost, you know, what is crucial for Sri Lanka is that the European markets remain open. And despite the numerous import bans and restrictions that Sri Lanka has put against products from outside and mainly from Europe over the last 3 years, we have never made any difficulties for Sri Lanka products to be exported to the EU. And to the contrary, we have kept GSP+, which allows the products to come into the EU tax-free, no import duty, despite, you know, serious concerns about some actions that had been taken, such as the pardon of a war criminal and the use of PTA for arbitrary arrest. Second, beside our markets remaining open, you know, we've kept the basic principles that allow Sri Lankan's family to reunite. For example, in some member states, we have made sure that the diaspora of Sri Lanka in Europe can continue to send their sizable remittances to Sri Lanka. We facilitate this, and we have kept Erasmus program, which is a student exchange program, in force. And only this year, there will be 27 Sri Lankans going to Europe to study. Third, and very important, tourism. Most member states have relaxed as soon as it was possible their travel advice. And beyond the travel advice, we keep developing air connection. There's Air France that flies. There's a lot which flew in the past and then will try to come back. We have invested, and you know, it's a grant, 4.5 million euro into the tourism sector, doing this first heritage trail near Kandy, doing a wellness campaign, bringing influencers to Sri Lanka. So we are really doing whatever we can to put Sri Lanka back on its feet through, as I said, the development program, but also tourism, remittances, diaspora, and markets, above all markets.
Could you comment on the impact of corrupt on the economy and the poor in the South Asian region, and what concrete steps should be taken to address this?
Well, corruption is a vast issue. It can take many different forms for many different reasons. For the sake of this debate, I would define corruption as the illegitimate and unfair use of public resources for, let's say, the disproportionate benefit of very few. So if one take that, you know, public resources for very few, we have to realize that those who suffer from these use of resources in an unfair way are those who have the least resources to start with. So it's really the poorest who suffer the most from corruption. So for us in Europe, our example, and I don't know if it can be shared, but we try to address corruption, which obviously is very present as well, through better civic mindedness. I mean, every single citizen has to be convinced that he should never engage or she should never engage in corruption. And for that, we need a strong focus on the rule of law. We have to make sure that the way laws are promulgated, it is done transparently after public debate, and therefore that justice remains independent, competent, and fair when it implements those laws that have been adopted transparently. So you need the citizens, you need the parliamentarians, and you need the judges to focus on that. We have a EU flagship program on justice. It's an 18 million euro for the Ministry of Justice. And we really want to, produce initiatives to provide better access to justice, digitalization, mediation, and above all, protection of women and children. And we believe that this is a good step towards eradicating corruption in Sri Lanka.
LMD has just launched a campaign titled Refresh Sri Lanka to spread awareness of the dire need to inculcate civic mindedness in society in order to build a model nation. Would you have any advice on how such a program should work if it is to succeed?
Well, I think that when it comes to communication, I think LMD is better placed than me to give any advice on communication. It is certainly useful to use crisis to do a bit of introspection, as you put it on your cover story on this topic on your website. Your guest writers on your website, for example, provide very good example. The Bar Association President Salia Paris emphasized the importance of the rule of law, as I just said. Shimali Wickramasinghe stressed how all law has to be applied in the same way to all. So it's exactly what I said as in the previous question, and I think that your guest writers are saying it all on your website.
Moving to Europe, what is your take on where the war in Ukraine is heading and the impact it is having on Europeans as much as the wider world?
Yes, having been in Sri Lanka for a number of years, I'm aware that many Sri Lankan friends express a traditional sympathy for Russia, and their recommendation is that the EU should find a quick compromise to end the war, and this leads to difficult debate. We understand that in the tradition of Sri Lanka, the non-aligned movement, the rejection of imperialism, it has been quite natural to find good reasons for Russia to defend Russia. But at the end of the day, what's happening in Ukraine is an attack by a dictatorship on a democracy. And if there's something I could admire even recently, where the democracy was in danger in Sri Lanka, is that Sri Lanka is a resilient democracy. It has an incredible attachment to it, and it implements it. You've seen the crisis over the last few months. Democracy has been in difficult situation, but at the end, all the politicians rallied around democracy. So for me, it's a bit surprising that people who love democracy so much and practice it don't defend the democratic country that is, attacked by a dictatorship. The second surprise for me is Russia is a big superpower, or at least a regional considerable power, and it's attacking a smaller neighbor. So anyone would expect Sri Lanka to relate more to Ukrainians than to Russians, especially when Sri Lankan individuals, 7 of them, were kept in jail and tortured by the Russians. Where is the reaction about that? Where is the solidarity with fellow Sri Lankans? They were not put in jail by the Ukrainians. And third, this is a conflict where now you have serious threats of nuclear weapons. And again, one would think that Sri Lanka would be particularly sensitive to threats of nuclear powers, as South Asia was once described as the nuclear flashpoint of the world. When people start to mention nuclear threat in such an inconsiderate way with large ramification, this should make people think, especially those who are close to powers that have nuclear weapons. So I don't know where the conflict is headed. Recent developments have confirmed that the escalation strategy of Russia is only increasing global turmoil with consequences for all of us. Now Russian men are leaving Russia in drove to avoid the compulsory drafting. Will they come here as tourists because they don't need a visa, or because Aeroflot will restart the flights? I hope not, because this is not what you want to look at. So I hope Sri Lankan friends will realize what this conflict is about and will take a stronger stance on this.
How about the prospect of global recession amid spiraling inflation? Are we heading towards a world economic crisis and growing poverty? What more can the global powers that we do to avert such a scenario?
Yes, well, we want to be optimistic, but it's not always easy in the current times. No later than 15th of September, the World Bank assessed the growing risk of global recession. And the elements are clear. We have a contraction of financing, so interest rates are rising, quantitative easing is stopping. We have spiraling inflation because of post-COVID demand and energy hikes, partly caused by Russia. And we have difficulties of economic policies. We can see, that the Federal Bank in the US is putting very steep increase in rates, which has an impact on the economy, or even the UK tried to have a mini budget, but the reaction of the market was quite negative. So it's very difficult to know what is the right thing to do. I don't think it's only the global powers who have something to say. Everyone has something to do and say. As far as the EU is concerned, as mentioned with the relationship with Sri Lanka, we continue to trade, we continue to expand tourism, to defend the free flow of capitals, of investments, with obviously preservation of our concerns on national security. But we want the people to work together in full transparency. So for example, in the case of Sri Lanka, since you asked what can be done for Sri Lanka, we really recommend full transparency and apply the G20 framework, the principle, which is basically Paris and non-Paris club members work together for the debt restructuring and the debt alleviation of Sri Lanka.
If you may to end on a positive note, what makes Sri Lanka tick for you, if it does?
If you ask me what I enjoy the most here, you would need to double the airtime that is devoted to the broadcast. Sri Lanka is obviously a small island, but it's packed with so many fascinating wonders that there's never a dull moment. And because there's never a dull moment, time flies. First, it's a country that has mountains and sea, that it has dry zones and tropical forest, rice and tea, leopards and crocodiles, elephants and whales, the largest two mammals that you can see within an hour. There are not many places in the world that you can have. But it has also human-made wonders, and for me, I had the chance to travel extensively. It's really on the scale of the famous Seven Wonders, be it Sigiriya, the way it is built, the way the water goes up in the tanks, or is it Anuradhapura, the pagoda, or Polonnaruwa. There are so many other structures around Sri Lanka that people know less, but that I discover because I cycle all around the island and I discover these structures, and it's magnificent, magnificent. And then for tourists, Sri Lanka is an incredible culinary culture. The love of the people for their curry seems irrational to foreigners, but it translates into a taste for food and cooking that is a delight for visitors like me. And last but not least, the people. They are resilient, refined, very complex people, which makes it fascinating to try to understand. And this complex islander relation with foreigner never stopped to fascinate me.
Thank you for that. We are grateful that you took your time to discuss with us your perspectives on the current socio-economic and geopolitical climates around the world, as well as the role EU plays and would play in supporting Sri Lanka. Thank you, Ambassador.
My pleasure.
That's all from us tonight. Good night.
Good night.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching and stay safe.